Today we're looking at a book that presents Jeet Kune Do's counters to grappling situations. Hi guys, my name is Joe, and welcome to Fighting Words, the martial arts library. On this channel I review martial arts books and talk about other martial arts related subjects. The subject for today's review is Jeet Kune Do Volume 2, Counterattack, Grappling Counters And Reversals. The authors are Larry Hartsell and Tim Tackett, and the book was published in 1987. As far as the authors' backgrounds go, Mr. Hartsell was in particular known for his background in grappling and his exploration of grappling. Mr. Tackett has been a very prolific martial arts or Jeet Kune Do author. Actually, he published some books on Singyi as well, I think. At least one. So, got a lot of his Jeet Kune Do books back here. The book as a whole is presented as offering various counters to grappling attacks, including various tie-ups, tackles, and standing locks. The first chapter looks at counters to various tie-ups or standing clinches. A lot of these include other grappling maneuvers, as well as the use of trapping and boxing. It looks to counter techniques like the collar and elbow tie-up, which is a very common wrestling tie-up that, frankly, you're probably not going to find on the street. But also tie-ups like wrapping up one or both arms, and what they refer to as a tight clinch, which we would look at as the Muay Thai plum. Again, these counters can include things like trapping the person's hands before they engage, using strikes and then following on with your own grappling techniques, or using boxing techniques in order to counter some of these tie-up attempts. Chapter 2 looks at countering various leg attacks. For instance, a tackle. I'm not going to call it a double leg because it's not properly a double leg. As well as some single leg takedowns that you probably aren't going to find in wrestling. One of them is labeled as a Kali technique, for instance, where you step on the guy's foot and you push on his knee. I don't know how often one is going to encounter that outside of a Kali class. Again, a lot of these counters involve things like striking and trapping and utilizing your own grappling techniques. It is a bit of a disappointment. I can see the application for some of the tackles from a distance. Somebody rushes at you and tries to grab you around your waist or your legs. And yeah, just sort of like posting on their head, fine. Somebody starts to dip their head low, maybe you hit them with a knee. You're probably not going to be able to use these against someone who is skilled in leg takedowns, because they're not going to perform these takedowns as they're shown in this book. The third chapter is interesting. It begins with a 15-part lock flow from Kali. So these are various standing locks, wrist locks, elbow locks, shoulder locks, even finger locks, I think. From there, it will show counters to some of those locks that have been included. This is all in the same chapter, and I think is a cohesive chapter that works pretty well. Chapter 4 gets into counters for, let's call them head holds. These include things like, a side headlock as well as like a rear choke, things like that. Again, a lot of the counters include striking first and then following on with your own grappling techniques. I think a lot of the things here are pretty solid for self-defense, to be honest. The next chapter, chapter 5, will look at counters to, let's say, more conventional judo-style throws, so like rear sweeping throws or shoulder throws and hip throws. Again, some of these are pretty good. They're using leverage to defend against the throws and, maybe using some locks and chokes to follow up against that. So again, you're using grappling to counter grappling most of the time, as with the rest of this book. The final chapter is on ground fighting, primarily showing defenses against, for instance, being underneath the mount or being underneath a turtled up position or on your stomach. Some of these work well. Some of them, I think, would not work particularly well against someone who was determined to attack you. But there are options being presented there. The last page or two shows defenses against a standing opponent. I'm not sure why this was included in grappling, because most of them are like, kick his groin or kick his legs. But there you have it. It was included in the ground fighting section. You're on the ground, opponent is standing. Now, as far as the pros go, I appreciate that there are some lesser studied grappling areas here, including like defenses against wrist locks and some of these less conventional standing locks. Some of the defenses are pretty good. Like I called out the defenses against, the head holds section. I think those are good. Some of the defenses against the standing throws and sweeps are pretty solid. So I think it could be a good resource for those. As far as the cons go, I already sort of called out the fact that they're showing defenses against a single leg attack that you are probably never going to encounter. In other instances of when am I going to have to defend against that, some of the techniques are more pain reliant than others. That's not something that I would rely on when things like drugs or adrenaline come into play. Pain is sort of a bonus in self-defense. I generally prefer leverage or shutting down the brain. So who would I recommend this to? If you practice Jeet Kune Do, I think it's a solid book to have just because it's part of that lineage. If you're interested in self-defense, again, there are some specific chapters here that I think are good. Again, I think the chapter on countering the head holds and maybe some of the throws are solid and they could be practiced. I think some of the ideas contained in here are good. Countering the grabs with strikes before you move on to your own grappling techniques. I think that is a good idea, and it's seen in some of the earlier chapters. If you are an experienced grappler, some of this is old hat at best. If you want to learn how to defend against grappling, there are better resources out there. But again, against head holds and certain standing throws, it still holds up okay. Anyway, that's all I have for this week. If you guys have any feedback, please let me know, leave a comment, and I'll see you guys later.